Hey there, Jeremy. Welcome back for, I think, a third time. A third
Whoa.
time. It's a Where Are They Now episode. We had you back, I think, the first time on episode 177, which was a while ago. Then
Mhm.
we talked to you last year and kind of filled us in on some of the changes along the way. And I
Hey,
know that
look out,
you,
James Tanton, eh?
I know, I
You're
know.
hot on the heels of James Tanton. I think he's
hmm
three and a half, right?
I
We
know, I
decided.
know. I think we were chatting last time around, how to kind of you know think about your problem-based lessons and keep kids in the flow. And so we're ready to kind of keep this discussion going and hear how things have been going. We said we'd check in with you, and here we are. So fill us in. Any changes along the way? Like, what, you're still in the same role? You still coming from Boston? Like, fill us in on some of the those type of details, and then we'll dig in.
Yeah, so I'm still at the same school, which is it's a vocational school in Boston, Massachusetts, a public school and a high school, and I'm a 10th grade geometry teacher. And one of my classes is an honors class, which is awesome. And then another one is really cool too, but it's just a kind of a general population. It's like
Right.
um, just general, maybe some students that are on like IEPs, like,
Yep.
and then I have a third class, which is actually some English language learners.
Okay.
So it's like,
Very interesting. So
yeah,
it's giving you a
You got a
diverse,
mix.
cross section, right? And I'm super curious to kind of go down that path a little bit. And but what I recall back the last we spoke was, you were trying some new things, but it was almost like you were in a bit of we talked about it before we hit record, like in a bit of survival mode. So can you sort of maybe just to catch some of the listeners up? We have lots of people who listen to all the podcasts, but it may have been quite a while since you were last on. So could you maybe give like a high level view, your perspective of maybe where you were then, and
Mm.
yeah,
sort of like what the big takeaway was from that episode that you started to try to focus in on? Then we'll kind of cruise into sort of what's happening, what's changed over time.
yeah. So I mean, it's just funny. Like, so last year, as I was like kind of, I felt like I was in survival mode because
hmm
like the previous year, I was co-teaching with somebody, and I was more of kind of like I felt like I was kind of like pushing into the classroom. I was a special ed teacher, still with a math license, but the
Right.
way it was just the other guy was really like the teacher. He was like seen as a teacher, and I was kind of like the helper, or not the helper, but just more of like um that at least that's how the teachers like viewed me, it was just kind of
Right.
Got it.
but
Yeah.
anyway, but I was like special ed, so I was kind of helping out with like just some of the kids who needed like extra help. So then
Sure.
in my mind though, during that year, I was like, oh my God, I was like, next year I'm gonna do like, if once I get my own classroom, I'm gonna do everything like differently. Because I've been listening to your podcast like religiously, and I was like, I can't believe like I'm seeing this, and like so I was like,
Right.
I can't wait to get my own classroom. And then I got my own classroom, and like I just I couldn't I felt like I couldn't do anything like right.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Well, it's
was
it's it's probably like that feeling of like overwhelm, right? There's so many things, and it's like, what do you do next, right? Like, what do you focus on? I've got to get my curriculum
Right.
together. I've
It's
got to,
a
it's
it's
a
a
tough.
lot. It's a lot, and I think we've said this here, and it can be. It's almost like if you listen like religiously to what we talk about here on a regular basis. I find it's not that we're giving a false impression of what it's really in the classroom, but we have to kind of think about that the people that we're talking with, the way Kyle and I, taught or teach, there was a long progression to get there, and I think sometimes we get that tendency. I've said that this many times in the podcast is that we tend to compare our bottom, 80% to people's top 20%. And I think if you kind of pick up where people are talking about on this particular podcast, you're like, I got to be doing that. I got to be doing that. I got to be doing that. And then we just start. It's so much, right? It's so
Mhm.
much. Whereas we didn't even do it that way. Like we did little change over the course of 19, I taught for 19 years in high school classrooms. So it took me 19 years to get to where I was. And I think we want our classrooms to be like, boom, ready to go, and it just,
Mhm.
I know it takes time. And it might, that's what happened to you. So it's like, we apologize. We apologize, Jeremy, that we made you feel so overwhelmed, by listening in and trying all the amazing things. So where are you now? Like, fill us in. Like, where you felt like you were in survival mode. You were trying to figure out the flow of your room. You're trying to, manage everything, and now you're, I don't know what. Fill us in. How are you feeling now?
Yeah, I feel
Been a
like
year later.
so like I just want to say this. My school, like I'm actually really happy about this because it's like everything that you guys talk about, like our principal is aligned with it.
Love it.
My math coaches, the the lead math teachers, and also I guess like there's an assistant principal that's head of the math department. They're all on board with this whole like well, I mean what we call this? It's just kind of like
Good teaching.
just transfer.
I like it. Yeah. I love it. I love it.
I mean, I guess it's like one way to say is like we're transferring the heavy lifting to the students. So it's like,
Ah,
That's a great
and
way to describe it. That's exactly, the goal, right?
and I want to say like, and that's gonna just well anyway. I mean, so that's like what our school is trying to do, and like we're doing like this like school-wide this like think pair share, which is it's just I guess is
sure.
another way to say like the you do, y'all do, we do, whatever. It's just like it's you give the students like think time, and then you go, okay, talk to your partner.
Yeah.
And then, then we have that share out, which is kind of like the sequencing. That's what the teacher's supposed to be doing, right? So it's like, it's, and like, it's like I'm seeing some good success with that,
I love it. You know what? That one move, that one protocol, I remember the first time I heard it, think, pair, share. And in my head, as the educator, like I didn't know what it looked like in action, but I'd heard about it. And we learned about it probably in like some sort of staff PD. This was very early in my journey. And I sort of was like, I have no idea how I would use that, and I just never really knew. And then through this journey, that's essentially what we were doing. And I didn't even necessarily recognize it as that because I don't necessarily say it that way to my students, although some people do. But the reality is when we give those students just a little bit of time, and when you let the room actually go silent and just allow everybody to just allow their thoughts to happen, and take some time to sort of, think if they choose. And some students may not, like some students may just sit, right? And that's hard too. We want to nudge them along as well. But then we give them that opportunity to now turn and talk and say, hey, like, what's going on? What'd you think? As soon as someone talks, and as soon as, that one person says something relevant, if it's different than what the other person was thinking, there's this sort of like, natural sort of human response to sort of like share your thoughts, right? Like you share your opinion. And then it just makes everyone feel so much more comfortable to be able to like, I've been validated by my partner.
That's exactly right.
Right. And, or if maybe the partner wasn't a great partner and maybe they didn't validate what I said, or maybe they helped me to see something I was missing, then I might actually now have an opportunity to rethink. And maybe I do change my perspective on that, right? And it just gives everybody just a little opportunity to kind of get their thoughts going, to, throw it out there at a small level, be it one, or maybe it's a small group. And then, hey, I've got some, confidence here now. Maybe even if I'm not necessarily like super excited to share in front of a group, maybe I might be willing to, because, hey, I know that multiple people have my back here.
I know, and Jeremy, I want to hear your thoughts on this too. But I know that if I wanted whole class discussion and I did not do a think, pair, share first, there's no way that I was getting the same level of engagement and discussion happening at the whole group level if they didn't already do what you just said, Kyle, and engage in the think first and then the share with the elbow partner to get the validation. But I don't know, Jeremy, what do you think? Like, what has been you said you're having success with that. What does it look like for you?
Yeah, first of all, like you guys said, like that think time, it's just like I love the idea of just like, helping students see that they have something they can bring to the table, like so it's like, what can you like do with this and what can you do with this information, so like and we have strategies for that. We have like, do like the 3 reads, or like you know, can you draw a picture? Can you like, you know, what's the important information? So, you know, like, so that's to help students. We're just gonna try and like just like sit there and do nothing. So we're trying to be like, can you draw a picture? So I love that idea of just like letting them try something on their own and build that, you know,
100%.
yeah.
100%. Well, and you know, something that I think it does, and it might be easy to miss, but I've also noticed is like when we actually do take we're intentional about it. So it's like we're going to take a couple minutes here. So again, is it 45 seconds to think on your own? Is it a minute? Like it's like at first, I think we're hesitant because like when the classroom gets quiet, it's almost like feels awkward a little bit. But when it becomes a habit, right, where it's like this is how we do things in our classroom, it slows down the pace a little bit, right? So it's like we're not just I am the type of person when we talk about intentionality on this podcast. I've always been this way as an educator. When I wanted to do this, and this, I was making sure I got through it. And it's like to be able to like pause, the students are pausing and thinking, but think about the effect that it has on us as the educator. It gives you an opportunity, whether I don't know if I realized this early in that journey, but when I have that time to look and observe to see like who appears to be thinking. I don't know if they are or not because it's all happening upstairs, but who seems to be in it. But then it also lets me reframe, where do I want to take this next? What was the question I wanted to ask, you know, to kind of draw this out? You know, these are really important moves that not only help the students, but it helps us to kind of like pause, reflect, maybe even take a quick glance if I have, you know, a little point form note of like, you know, where I wanted to go next or things that I really thought were important for the lesson. It's like, okay, I know where I'm going. You know, I'm back. All right, let's bring it back and let's let these kids talk. So I love that. So I'm wondering, let's keep on cruising here. It sounds like, you know, you said you've had some gradual, you know, sort of like, you know, we'll call it progression towards this classroom that you're envisioning. So talk to us a little bit about that. And then where would you say is your current pebble? Because we always say like when we take a pebble out, it's like you realize there's way more in there, right? Like you take this one out and you're like, that one was bugging me. I move it. And then you go, oh, shoot, there's another one there now. So what's going on in your classroom right now? What's on your mind lately that we can kind of unpack together?
Yeah, and I just want to just say one last thing about like my takeaway from last time I was on the
Yeah.
on the
Yeah,
on the
absolutely.
podcast. It's just like I was talking about like at one point I was talking about like classroom discussions. So like this year, you know, as the students are talking to each other, you know, and then you know, I am sequencing, and so and I do tell the student, I'm like, I'm gonna have you share first. So it's like when it's time, okay, I'm like, we're gonna have a class discussion now. And I'm like, okay, Chris, you start us off. Like, what did you do first? So it's like I find that like it's working so well. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's just like so he'll kind of walk me through it, and then like I'll be like, okay, now I want to talk. Then I had like a second kid lined up, and so then I'll talk to the other student. But it's like as it is happening, like students are starting to like ask questions and like so it's not perfect, but it's going much better, you know.
I
So
love it. I
yeah,
love it.
Awesome.
And the one thing I noticed, like as soon as we got on the call today and, you know, before we sort of, you know, turn this episode on, hit that record button was, you know, just this idea that, you know, you were seeing things gradually improving and like, you know, again, just highlighting this, giving ourselves grace that it's not an overnight thing and that, you know, it does take practice and, you know, I like it this way. I didn't like how that part happened. There's constant tweaking, which I think is actually what makes this such a really awesome, you know, career, right? Where you get to be there and you get to, it's not like just doing the same thing over and over again. It's actually by like every single time I do something, I get to like play with it just a little bit to try to get it a little bit better. So where would you say, you know, you are at in that journey and where, you know, where is that, you know, current pebble kicking
yeah,
around for you?
yeah. I was really trying to like because I had so many. I was like trying to think about like, but I guess it all kind of led to like, um, I guess it's like I guess it's like student engagement. Like it's like basically like one thing I got critiqued on was like it seems like Mr. Sarzana is doing most of the heavy lifting in the class. I mean, what I just talked about was like, I should say that like that was like kind of like my honors class has been going really well with the think pair share. But I'm saying like my, like just the general ed classes, it's just kind of like, um, I'm kind of like a lot of times it's like, it's just, we'll do the quiet time and they'll just kind of just like go on their phone or just like, they'll just check out. And I'm wondering, is it because there's not that low floor enough? I'm wondering if it's like, because I do the exact same, sometimes I do the exact same stuff I'm doing in my honors class with my gen ed classes. And it's just like, the honors class, it goes great. And then like, I'm wondering like, is it like, I'm trying to think like,
Yeah.
is it
I
because
think
it's not low? Good.
I'm imagining what that, I think people listening as well are kind of like, I've been there, like I tried this here and I had no problem with engagement over here. It's not working the way I thought it was going to be. And especially with when you say a think pair share and getting them to do that think, like I wonder, makes me kind of wonder a few things about what typically, happens at the beginning of class, like, and then also the middle of the class and at the end of the class. So paint me a picture, like what do you feel is the main difference right now between the two classes? Let's say your honors class, and right now your kids who are kind of like checking out. And what does the structure say of your lesson look like? At the beginning, the middle, of the end.
Okay, so like 9 times out of 10, we do like a notice and wonder, which
Okay.
is, and it's also like, so it's like we give them time to, it's like they come in, they take the paper and they're supposed, it's a notice and wonder. So they write down 3 things that they notice and wonder or something like that in
Yeah.
5 minutes. And then, I'm walking around and like, and then I just basically have everybody share something. But I guess what I'm trying to think is, so that's like 9 times out of 10 that happens, and
Okay.
that's always great. I mean, it's like in some of my classes that like there's less engagement. I'm like almost like that's like the best part of the day for me, really, because it's like now I'm finally like hearing like their own thoughts and like what what's going on in their heads. You know what I mean? Because sometimes the kid will be like, "Oh, I see the area up there," and then he'll be like alluding to the radius of a circle or something like that. So like I'm getting all these, and like I don't say anything. I'm just like, okay. And then like I'll be like, what did whatever, I'll write it on the board, you know what I mean? And then
Yep.
I'll go, okay, because I've learned not to be like, no, that's not the area, that's this. I've learned to like just leave it there.
Yep.
And hopefully maybe a student will say something, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
like I just leave it there and then like go on to the next student and like, because in the curriculum that we're using, it talks about notice and wonders, but it basically just it says if
Right.
some student says something about the whatever, they'll say, I see the radius is 5. You kind of like mark it there. You're like, well, oh yeah,
Yeah.
you annotate
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
So you point it out there. But then it's just basically like, then you do the wonders. And then the curriculum that we have is just basically like, is there anything else anybody is wondering? You say that at the end.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
But I mean, at least I've just been following that and just not doing anything more with that. Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. John, I'm
I
wondering like
was I was
for
just
you,
yeah, I was
you're
just
looking sideways, so I can tell you're thinking,
that's
John.
my
You're
head
going
tilt.
like,
My head tilt.
yeah. Because I
S-
always I feel like there's so many different nuances to how you can engage a group in a notice and wonder. Is that where you're
yeah.
going, John? I think it
I
is.
kinda yeah.
All
And
right.
I have some thoughts on what I think I heard and what maybe we could do for sure to kind of like get at that. And so what you're I'm trying to get at the real issue here. So you're engaging in a notice and wonder, and you're engaging in kind of that protocol, and you're not seeing the engagement, or you are seeing the engagement. Because I was getting it, like I heard like kids are saying stuff and you're writing it down, and
Yeah.
I'm imagining what that looks like in my class and the way I do it. So I'm wondering where the real issue is here, or it's like you're only getting what, maybe a couple kids are saying stuff and it's not going the way it goes in the other room. Fill me in on like where the
Yeah.
real issue is here.
So that's like, I mean, the engagement is great with that. And as I said, like
Okay.
that's like my favorite part of the day.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, as I said, it's like I'm hearing like the student's own thoughts, not like, so
Sure,
that's great.
sure.
But I guess after we do the notice of wonder, it's like then we have like then we start doing the think, pair, share. So it's like I did bring like a lesson because I wanted to bring something like specific, but basically it's like, so as I said, this went great with my
Okay.
honors class, but then I did it with my other students, and it was basically like we're talking about circles now. So it's basically like um in this day we didn't do a notice and wonder, so I'll start that off. It's basically this is a do now, and they're given like a few circles with like, and we're trying to we're leading them into like talking about area of like sectors, like what portion of the circle is, what is the area of that portion of the circle, right? So we're getting to that, and so the first question is just like, we put the formulas for them. We're like, area of a circle is this, right? Pi squared, radius squared times pi. So it's on the paper for them, right?
Okay.
And then there's like a circle, and like you can see like the first one is like half shaded, and the second one like 3/4 of it shaded. And then so this is supposed to be like independent. I say it's kind of hard to see without like a visual, but
Yeah,
It's okay.
yeah.
I'm just trying to. I just have
I'm
to like I look up and I'm like I'm imagining. So keep it going. Keep it going.
yeah.
yeah, I
But
like
so
it.
it's just, and then basically like, and that's what that was like. So we also like as a department, we modify the curriculum. Like we take like the curriculum and we kind of do our own tweaks. And that's like the lesson that we came up with. It was just like, we'll just give the students this, and we'll like give them the area formula for a circle. And then like the final question is like, what is the it specifically says find the area of the shaded sector of the circle.
Mhm.
So
So what
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
what
Yeah.
I'm hearing based on what you're saying, and again, these are all just ideas because when we're sharing, it's never like there's never a way unless we're like there, to be
Mm.
able to say like, oh yeah, absolutely this or absolutely that. But some of the things I'm hearing make me wonder if it's almost like, when it comes to that notice and wonder protocol, one of the ways that I try to treat that notice and wonder protocol is I actually try to treat it as really loose. Like I try to keep it very, very loose, meaning, I'm actually trying to get students to truly share anything and everything they notice and wonder. So that's one thing. But then in order for that to be successful, if I'm struggling in that spot, then where I start to go is the problem, is the problem like curious enough out of the bag for a student to actually be interested in that notice and wonder, and it's a hard thing because it's not every problem is going to just be like super ultra curious, right? Like especially when I'm in geometry, for example, it could be something I work towards in my classroom culture where it's like, hey, we can now find, very curious things. But I wonder about, when I'm doing a problem, and we like to call that like a problem-based lesson, we think about like what is sort of the surprise that I'm trying to get them towards. Dan Meyer calls that the mathematical surprise. So it's like, why are we doing this problem? They don't need to know why yet, by the way. But me, in my mind, I go, at some point, they need to want to know something about this thing. And I'm going to try to breadcrumb them along. And that initial notice and wonder can be helpful, but sometimes it can be difficult in certain cases. So then I've got to start sort of almost think of like, what's going to be the wonder if, let's say, the notice and wonder flops and like kids are just, not interested in engaging. It's like, that's where I think I've done when you were talking about you doing the heavy lifting or the kids doing the heavy lifting. It's like, I think the heaviest lifting we do is before the lesson when we try to anticipate what might happen. And then even more so, what am I going to do if that thing doesn't happen the way I wanted it to? Right. Like in a perfect world, I walk in, I always talk about, my first year teaching. I thought walking into a classroom, the kids were all going to love it. They were going to love everything I had to share about math. And it turned out that they didn't. The problem I had was that I didn't spend any time thinking about that possibility. So now I'm going, okay, if it's a notice and wonder, and let's say the notice and wonder goes short, they share a couple things, and I'm like, okay, I can tell that we've kind of lost, or I'm not getting the engagement from the notice and wonder. Now that's where I can go, you know what I'm wondering? And then you pose the question. And even though it's not their wonder, but it's like a good, juicy question that opens that door for some sort of estimate, some sort of prediction, some sort of conjecture, where now you can utilize that structure that you're already becoming, I'm going to call you expert in, the think, pair, share. When you go based on blank, and I don't even know, we were talking radius and circle. So I'm picturing it's a geometry problem of some type. And you go, how many units do you think, if you know that it's this many units from here to here, I want you to look at this line right here. We haven't even defined it. We haven't defined it as a chord or, whatever term that we talked about. We're just like, I want you to look here. And I want you to tell me, knowing what you know now, because you've noticed the radius, you notice this, you notice that. I'm wondering, make a guess, turn to your neighbor and tell them how many units and why do you think so? And that turn and talk happens. And all of a sudden, it's like, my notice and wonder may not have happened the way I would have out of the textbook done it, or out of the, the curriculum, the way that the curriculum said we were going to lead this. But it's like, I saved the day with a good, curious question, which is a good, curious wonder that nobody else wondered in the room, but you had already thought of as like this is where I'm going to get them. Yeah. Now, I know we're speaking in general terms here because we don't even know what this question actually is, but I see you nodding over there. So I'm curious to hear like what's resonating about that, or do you see how there might be something there where, you might be able to kind of latch onto it and maybe take that curiosity a little bit further?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that like it basically comes down to it's like what fraction of the circle is like shaded. So like I think you can say like could have done an estimate. Like if you're in your estimation, like what fraction of the circle, and then maybe we wouldn't do like half, obviously. Maybe it would be like, something like some like angle that's like not obvious, but maybe they can estimate it, but
if you think about, having that prompt ready to go, like something that's going to give them a little bit, but not give them enough information where they can actually calculate or come to the actual answer to your wonder. That is sort of the magic land where you're like, we like to call it the sunk cost territory, right? And if you read up on the sunk cost fallacy, it's this idea that the more you put into something, the more you want to stick with it. So it's like the kids now are looking into it. They don't have enough information. And if that lack of information, the open loop that's there, right? They're like, I wonder what that is. And even the students, even if half the students don't even give it a good prediction, and they're just sitting there, I always laugh because you get you get that student, everyone has the student that's a little too cool for school, like they're in class and they're like, I'm not participating, they like have that stance about them, right? And they're sitting there and you can tell they're not even looking at it. And then somebody says, I think it's blank long, or I think it's this fraction of the circle. And then you see that student do one of these, like a double take, like it's like they look up and they're like, how do you think it could be a quarter? Like that's impossible, and all of a sudden they're in now. So they were trying to hold, like fold their arms and say, I'm not going to, predict and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, they kind of almost naturally did in their mind. And then somebody else said something different. And now they're like all in. And that is like, we've had so much success, both when we work with adults in educator, workshops and, any of our presentations, our keynotes that we've done, but also with students all the way through high school in we'll call it the cool grades, right? When kids start, hitting that age where, they're just too cool for school. And it's like, we can give them that awesome sort of, that awesome prompt that doesn't have enough information. What you start to see is people start to go, you know what? It's like, it's an even playing field here because like nobody has
Yeah.
like the trick on me. You know, no one has the quick algorithm yet. It's like we can all contribute here. And when you get to that point, everyone thinks that they're like, you know, God's gift at that point, right? They're like, well, it's got to be what I think, right? That's what my quick thinking brain is resorting to.
Yeah, and I wanna speak a little bit to timing, you know, especially in the difference between, say, an honors class and say, do you have a name for your other
I was
class? And
just
like
saying,
here in
it's
Ontario, we have
it's
different names for different, but they're not going to be the same as yours.
yeah, it's just basically like I would call it just like a general like
Okay,
the general
so
education. Yeah.
right. So what I mean by that is that when I say do any of these prompts, like Kyle's talking about the, you know, modifying the prompt to be engaging and allow that kind of sinking of teeth in, which is really important. But when I think about my classrooms that I've had, say those, you know, you said general kind of stream versus honors stream, is that when I'm doing the honors stream class, I have the luxury because you're not battling typically you're not battling with like behavioral engagement, right? So it's like you can give off, you know, timing you can be more relaxed with timing in that case because we know that if you're not filling dead space or you're not trying to keep the things moving, you know that they'll as soon as you start talking again or whenever, you know, that focus needs to come back, they will do it. Whereas when you're with the other class, the timing is really important to get right because you could lose them, right? All of a sudden you'll lost the group. And I find that when I am doing the beginning protocol, the notice and wonder, you know, the estimation, I'm a lot quicker to make sure that we get the thinking in, but we move fast in that stage. And I want the thinking in. I want them to share their thoughts, but I don't leave a lot of time to get those in, especially in the beginning with these classes. So it's kind of like, you know, I'm moving around the room and it's like, well, what do you know, what's your notice of wonder? Give me a notice of wonder. Give me a notice of wonder. And it's like they throw it out at me sometimes just to keep things moving quick. I don't write them down because I know I need to kind of keep this moving. Otherwise, I'm going to
Mm.
lose them. And it's like, get it in here, get it in here. And it's like, you might write a quick one down. And it's like, you get those notice and wonders out quick. And then it's like, give them that next bit, like what's that next piece that kind of unfolds? Like what Kyle was saying is like, you're holding back as much as you can. And then it's what the next is. Then it's like, well, now all of a sudden, maybe the think pair shares happening, but you're short on time on there. Turn and talk. You got 30 seconds. Like I used to use time in that just to keep that engagement high so they didn't have time to like pull out their phone because it was like short snip bursts of like
Mm.
think moments. And then it's like because you wanted to make sure that they kept their thinking going. As soon as you start noticing that there's like drop off, it's like something's got to be different. I got to change something. And so it's noticing that time. You have to be really quick with that to go like keep things moving. And then when you want them to do that, like turn, like hit the boards, you know, that's when you can like allow that board work to happen now. Like you got into it. Now that the task is presented, now I'm moving, I'm bouncing around. And it's like, okay, everyone come to have a check. Let's look at this board right here. Let's talk about this. All right, go back to the board, you know, back to the boards. That timing, that cadence is a lot different because when I'm doing an honors class, I don't sound like what I just did. You know, like I'm a little bit more relaxed, you know, you feel like you can talk about this over here because you don't feel like you have to kind of like compete with like drop off attention. We have to like act a little bit and try to keep this thing moving like it's fast paced. You know, it's a fast paced movement here that we have to. I find it works better when you're in say a general level class when I'm doing those moves. It's the same lesson. It's just the timing's different. Does that make
Well,
sense, Jeremy?
yeah, it's like your audience is different, right? So
It's completely different.
I've gotta like get, and the hard part is that, you know, we as educators, I think most educators in most places anywhere would say it's easier to teach the students in say honors class setting, right? Or whatever pathway we came out of, right? Math teachers in particular is like you probably came out of something similar, most likely. Not everyone, but a lot of times. So it's like it just seems easier to do. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, if it's a different path or it's a different, you know, stream or however these classes are organized, you know, these are different. It's a different group, you know, and that can be
You got to
really
read it. You got to
interesting.
read the group.
Now, for those who are listening to this, like you missed out. Like you were John getting excited, but you didn't see him getting excited because like his arms were also very involved
That's what I do. That's
in
my
that
moves.
lesson. And that's what he does. If you've ever seen
Watch
him
out.
presenting, he does the same thing as well. So but let's flip it back to you there, Jeremy. Based on what John's saying, does that idea of like cadence and timing and, you know, kind of almost like looking at that audience and almost like trying to, you know, this is where like sometimes creativity is so important and knowing yourself, because what John just did works for John.
Yeah.
But that might not work for Jeremy, right? Like it's like knowing yourself and kind of knowing like, what am I going to use in order to draw on, you know, draw that attention in? And it doesn't have to look the same, even though it might be like John in that group of students. I know that's what John would have looked like, but Jeremy might look different, and you could still have a really favorable response, maybe even a more favorable response based on however you choose. But I'm curious to hear, you know, I see some head nodding there, but
Yeah.
you know, where's your head at? What's resonating, and is there anything still circling around based on what we've been discussing here?
I think that is it. Like just nailed on the head. Because I think I had it reversed. I think I was like, oh, these honors
More
kids,
time.
they need more time because it's like they're gonna really go deep into it. And like these and my other students, I think they need
You're like, I'm gonna get to the point, you know, and
well,
like
actually,
move them along, you know?
yeah, actually, yeah. No, I'm sorry. I was saying, so I got confused. I was thinking with my honors class, I thought they needed less time
Right.
because like they'll get it real quick and like,
Right.
and then with my other class, I was like, I got to give them more time.
Yeah.
But like with my general education does, because it's like it makes me think of this time when my math coach was like came in to observe me, and like and she kind of jumped into which was great, but like we spent like this is with that general education class, we spent like basically the whole period on like basically like the do now, and like it was like literally like pulling teeth, especially for the students, I'd say, you know what I mean, like
Right.
Right.
so it's just so that speed up the process is like I think that's going to be huge, you know. It's just because it's
Yeah.
like um
Well, and you know what I think too is like, you know, based on that, it's like after this episode, like after we you know, we're done and we, you know, hit the stop button, it's like take some time to like jot down. We're going to give you a think, pair, share, you know, but no, we'll have you actually just independently jot down some of these ideas, because the hard part is that you're going to have to play with it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the part about timing and cadence. It's not like, you know, when John and I started doing this process, it was like, I remember times where it was like I was zipping through and I was like, oh, that's not working. And then there was other times where I gave way too much time and it was like, oh, shoot, that's not good. There was times where I was like, I'm going to every single notice and wonder, I'm going to start and only do all the notices first. And then after a while, I was like, what am I doing? I'm like, I should just leave it wide open. Just you got a notice, you give me a notice. You got a wonder, give me a wonder. You got a this, you got a that.
Right.
You have something aimless to contribute. I'm okay with that too. I'm not going to like shut that down, because I was like, I just want energy, you know, and I feed off the energy in that room. And if I can them getting excited, you know what naturally happens to us as the facilitator? We start to feel like what we're saying matters, right? Like that this lesson that I spent a lot of time thinking about and planning actually matters. And then you start to get into it. And when kids see you get into it, right? Whether it's, you know, I have a colleague I'm picturing, he's a very calm, very quiet talker, but you can tell when he's excited. You know, you can hear it in the inflection in his voice. You know, it doesn't matter what the personality is. It's like knowing who you are, but getting that energy going, whatever that looks like and sounds like. It doesn't have to be loud energy, but just like the vibe in the room. You can feel, you know, the energy's rising in terms of the engagement and the thinking that's taking place.
Like the framework, right? The framework or the routines will only get you so far because they're just structures. It's how we read our audience, how we interpret, how they're responding to the prompts, and what we do next that really makes the teaching, you know, the art of teaching and getting it to the students what they need, right? Like who's in front of us. Because I've seen, you know, the same lesson presented to two different groups by two different teachers, and one goes great, one doesn't. And it's mostly because it's not because of personality. It's not because of it's about reading who's in front of you and modifying in the moment of what's needed to make sure you still hit your learning target, and keep in mind, keep the forefront of what you value in the room, which is maybe your thinking or your discussions and reasoning, proving, like thinking about the practice standards, right? Like we want those to come out. This is just a structure to help us get there easier, but we definitely have to read, our audience and make sure we're giving our audience what they need to allow those things to come out. It's an art, it takes some time to develop, and it's a trial and error type of thing. All right, Jeremy, what do you think is your big takeaway from today?
I was gonna say just what you just said, that it's like you have to read the room. It's like, oh, like now it's time to start speeding things up, like, or, even like, as I was saying with that general education class, like if they're really getting into it, then just, okay, let's give them more time. Let's keep going with this, So it's like, I want to be open to just kind of being able to read the room, but just keep in mind when I say, okay, I got to pick things up because like,
that is
yeah.
a huge takeaway, and I would argue a huge amount of work too, right? So this is more, it sounds like you are well aware of it based on, our conversations from the past, that it does take time, but I'm kind of saying it more for the other listeners to go, if it was easy to read a room, then that expression wouldn't exist, right? Like everyone's been in that scenario where we're going like, wow, did that person not read the room? And it's like, no, they didn't, because they were thinking about something else. And as facilitators, we have so much we need to be thinking about, right? Like we're thinking about like what comes next. We're thinking about, oh my gosh, there's a fire drill at, 9:37, and I got to make sure I get, the class to this point. There's so many things going on in our mind that it can be really, really challenging in order to kind of get that. But I also want you to think about, and don't forget about, the tool that you're already putting into use, that think, pair, share framework. And again, whether you call it that, whether you run it exactly like a think, pair, share, but using structures like that to help you pause. And when they're doing their thinking, now you're doing, I want to look around. I want to try to see like what is happening. Like, did I look over in that corner of the room yet? Like maybe I didn't look over there yet. Like, are they involved? Like, is that, and taking those times for yourself to kind of it's really just taking a temperature on the room. For engagement, we're taking temperature at all times on understanding. There's so many different metrics that we're trying to like, make sense of in the moment. It's an incredibly challenging, job. And I would argue too, if you reflect back to your role when you were doing the work as a special educator, right, in the classroom, you probably had more opportunity, and you probably were more aware of what was going on in that room than the teacher at all times, because that teacher's juggling all these ideas and the flow of the lesson and the this and the that. And you're there able to kind of like think with low stress, right? Because like as a teacher, when you facilitate in front of kids, adults, I don't care who it is, you're in front of a group, all of a sudden you have stressors in your brain, kind of like, blocking your thinking, and blocking some of the obvious things going on. So, if you're kind of visualize that perspective and go like, how can I create more of an environment through my lesson to give me the opportunity to take a step back, right? Or zoom out, from the classroom in a way to go, all right, where are we at? Things are going well. Awesome. Okay. Come back in. Now I'm back on track, like how can I get that habit going so that I'm constantly doing it? Because I'll tell you, I used to do, ours were 75-minute periods. It was like 75 minutes would go by and I'd be like, where'd the time go? Like no idea. Like it was like so much was going on. And I know that I missed a ton at the same time as well.
I mean, I just want to say the one last thing that like, I think that's like, I think you just made me realize that is like what's going better this year, is that my awareness of like what's going on in the room is like, I could feel it getting better. As well, the last year, I just kind of had my head down. It was
right.
Just like,
you're in survival.
yeah. But
that's
now
natural.
it's just like,
that's natural.
My
Love
awareness has gone up, and that's, I just a little bit.
I love that
And
you're
the beauty
aware of your
is-
awareness,
Yes, I was just going
Very
to say,
meta.
because the beauty is it only gets better. It's like we don't hit a place where we're like, I'm fully aware of everything. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you'll never be fully aware of it, but you'll every year you're going to be like, I feel a little more like that confidence happens, right? And as you get more confident, you're less worried about some of the other things that were clouding your mind. Like last year, lots of things clouding your mind, though some of those are gone, you know. And as you do this work, and as things become automatic as well. So think about that. There's going to be a time where as you're working through this, it's hard work in the moment, but as you figure it out, you start to automate some of these things. Like your brain starts to automatize and systematize this to go like, you know what? When student responses are like blank, you just automatically, you know, have a solution. You know, it's almost like you triggered that algorithm in your brain to kind of take over. So you're still in that sort of like exploration mode right now. We're like in the inquiry process of a problem-based lesson, and we're trying to work our way through to get to more efficient methods along the way. But we can't get to those methods until we kind of figure it out. Once you figure it out, then it's like, oh, you know what I mean? You're going to be like, well, that's obvious now, you know, or it'll just happen, you know, you don't even recognize it's happening and you just start getting better at it. So, Jeremy, I so appreciate you coming back on. We've got a number of people on the podcast now that are really on James Tanton's tail. So this is a call out to anyone and everyone out there in the math community. When you see James Tanton, tell him we've been talking smack about him and that he's going to lose his lead pretty soon. So hopefully he'll be joining us for another episode at sometime in the near future. But Jeremy, we appreciate you. We're wishing you all the best. You've got some great takeaways. We always have really respected how reflective you are as an educator and your willingness to continue not only being vulnerable here on the show and sharing some of these challenges along the way, but also the fact that you go and you do the work, which I think is fantastic, right? You do it and you let that practice and those reps sort of take over. So good on you, my friend. Awesome math moment maker. And we're excited to have another chat with you in 9 to 12 months again.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I want to see James Tanton more on the show.
Yeah, there you go.
I never want to catch him on.
We'll get him back. We'll get him back.
There
All right. Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Have a great one.
You too. All right. Bye-bye.
Catch you soon.
Bye
Catch
now.
you soon.
Okay.